Good evening. It's BourbonBlog Live. It is my good friend Dave Schmier, founder and proprietor of Proof and Wood Ventures. We're going to be tasting some very rare whiskeys, especially this first one. Always some new and exciting whiskeys from Dave Schmier. How's everything going for you, Dave?
2020, man. It's going 2020.
Well, for 2020, you gave us something that has been in the works for a while. All of your whiskeys have always been in the works for a while, but this particular one is something that I've never seen really much of this classification, especially at its age. Could this be the oldest light American whiskey ever released? Is this a world record of sorts?
I have no idea if it's a world record. I know that there have been some other releases of about the same age, maybe even a little bit older.
Right.
But as far as the classification of American light whiskey, quick kind of summary of what that is,
right,
is I believe it dates back to the 70s and 80s when the industry was taking a noticeable hit with lighter spirits, vodka,
right,
gin, rum, etc. And from what I understand, it was an attempt to put whiskey into that world, a lighter tasting whiskey. And essentially, really what it is it's distilled at a higher proof.
Okay.
So you're getting the actual distillates a little bit more neutral. And then, and this probably most importantly, and obviously it was probably also done from a cost standpoint, but also to create that idea of a lighter whiskey, was putting it in used cooperage. And so, with a bourbon and a rye, you're using a high char level, and you're getting those wood flavors right away, which is a great thing about bourbon and American rye. And those flavors really peak. Obviously every barrel is a little bit different, but often those flavors will peak between 7 and 12 years old. In general, obviously everyone's climate and mash bill and brick house, and then there's the outlier barrels. But when you get barrels that get older than the late teens, you're more likely than not to get just too much wood in there. But using used cooperage was helpful. And when these barrels, I think, were kind of lost to time, you actually got some really cool flavors and just some, great maturity in it.
Wow.
And
that's cool.
Yeah, it's fortunate to have been offered them a couple of years ago, and I kind of jumped at the opportunity. And granted, there wasn't much in each barrel after 25 years. But so, yeah, the journey for 100 Seasons actually began in 1992 when it was distilled. And the fun thing, the history of that distillery that we all like to talk about in Indiana, where I source most of my whiskey, at that point in time, it was still known as the Seagram's Distillery. Before Pernod bought it, before it became LDI, before it became MGP, it was the Seagram's Distillery.
And it was the Seagram's Distillery when this whiskey went into the barrel.
That is correct. And
so, as you look back, this might be there may be some older whiskey still in the warehouse, but this could be some of the last whiskey from that era when it was Seagram's that's being released now. Is that a fair statement?
It's a big place. You never know, but I'd be surprised to see much more that's older, or even as old.
So back then, the American light whiskey category was more prevalent. It was sold some, but really these days, that category, do we see it anywhere else? Is it a category that you've seen on the shelves anywhere else much?
Not that I can recall, and I don't even know if it really was much of a category. I would guess that a lot of the whiskey went into blends, is my guess.
Wow.
And I do have a blend we can talk a little bit about. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get you the sample in time.
That's okay. So what we're really looking at here, friends, is this is really you're tasting, not only tasting history in the degree of this is an older whiskey, but this is actually a category that you'd hardly find anymore unless you maybe had a vintage bottle from then. So this is truly, we talk about drinking through time and how old, even whether it's 5 years old, 10 years old, you're drinking through time and a lot of layers on this whiskey.
Absolutely. And again, it's real interesting whiskey, and it's very similar, I think, and comparable when you talk about kind of Scotch, Scotch blends. You've got your single malt, and then you've got your grain distillate that's distilled in column stills, and it's more for filler, giving body, making a palate for more bolder expressions of whiskey.
Right.
And again, this is really cool to taste on its own. Cheers.
Cheers, man. I'm just having
Better times.
Yeah, cheers to the end of 2020. This is something extremely special. Just even nosing this. I mean, there's some nice, you can tell there's nice age, but there's also this wonderful, there's a softness. It's like a nice dichotomy of soft and old char at the same time. What are you getting here? Why is that happening? What's going on here?
Well, the original whiskey that I got was, I think, about 130 proof.
Wow.
And one of the things that I did is and it had a lot of the same flavors. It did have a lot of heat on it. We put it in used rye barrels for about 8 weeks at different proof points to get some more sweetness out of it.
Some used rye barrels, you said.
Yep.
Okay. So that was just kind of awakening the whiskey a little.
Yeah, awakening, and then bringing the proof down at in a slow way, as to not shock the whiskey.
Right. And
then we brought it all back together. And I think our bottling proof was 102.3. So it's really, I mean, it kind of that lightness comes out at that proof point. But you definitely get the alcohol flavor. You get just so many cool flavors from the barrel.
And it's extremely interesting. I mean, it has this flavor that it's old, but because of this, again, it carries through with age. The flavor is delicate. I wouldn't say there's a lightness to it, but there's this nice, delicate, sort of almost aerated, delicate sugars that come through along with that char. If you would imagine, and maybe you have tasting this whiskey when it was released, maybe at 7, 8 years old, what do you think's happened to it? I mean, obviously over the years with this category, what happens to an American light whiskey that gets this old?
I mean, the base flavor stays remarkably the same. I've had 7-year-old, 12-year-old,
wow.
And you get a lot of these same notes. It just feels like it's got a little bit more depth, got a little bit more kind of gingerbread feel out of it as it got older.
Right, I get that.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. And again, some people doing the math are get confused because it's 25 years old, which is when we took it out of the original barrel, and then we gave it that light treatment in the used rye barrels for eight weeks, and then we had it sit in steel for about 2 years.
Wow. And as it sat there, what was happening?
Really it just mellowed a tiny bit, to be honest. The 2 years wasn't really planned. It was supposed to be a couple of months, but it took a while to get the package together. So that's a
lovely package. That's really nice.
One of the things that happens, best laid plans. So it's the first time I've really done a gift box kind of like this.
Nice. Very nice. And again, so if you're watching, it's extremely rare. The box that we see there, the bottle, there's only about, is it 25 of these bottles?
No.
No, not 25. I'm sorry, 500. I meant 500.
Right. You meant
25-year-old, 500 bottles.
Yeah,
there are 25, but there's 475 more. So it's 500 total bottles.
Correct.
Okay, 500 total bottles because I would imagine the volume. Talk about that a little bit as you look in the barrel. How much has gone to Angel's share over the years?
Trying to think. I think we lost maybe about 75-80% from each barrel.
Wow. This is so interesting. I mean, I think it shows, you think about some things and age on a really, really old bourbon and how there's this, of course, the chemical reactions that happen. There's obviously this, of course, the mouthfeel changes. But with this is extremely interesting. I do get that gingerbread note that you talk about. There's this wonderful spun sugar, almost like divinity candy against that barrel. There's a real true elegance to this, almost like I'm drinking an old cognac. I mean, it has some of those same characteristics that I would get on that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think you still get the notes of the whiskey, which is really interesting. Especially, I mean, the distillation proof was so high.
So interesting. So I know that you've at the time with Proof and Wood and your whiskey adventures, you've released a variety of ages of whiskey. This is one of the oldest you've ever released yourself. Is that true?
Yeah. The only thing older that I had my hand in I didn't even release it was the 36-year-old that Redemption released,
right?
Which was a bourbon, which was very old, and we'll leave it at that.
Was very, very, very old bourbon. Somebody's watching this and they want to get a bottle of it. How do you track down one of these bottles? How do you find one of these?
Really, you go to the Google. The probably with this one, because it's so limited, is to shoot us an email at Proof and Wood and put you in touch with the local distributor.
Okay. And do you mean to share that email? Is there a best email to share?
info@proofandwood.com should work.
info@proofandwood. I'm going to put it up on the screen. That way, if you are watching this, info@proofandwood.com, and you're saying, I want one of these bottles, I want to hunt down one, email the team there at info@proofandwood.com. They'll help you. Certainly something that is extremely special. Gingerbread, the spun sugar. What other notes do you get out of it? I mean, what else when you taste this and this is, when you put this out in the world, what are you tasting?
To me, I mean, the first thing I tasted was magic, which
see the sparkles coming out of it. Yeah, no, it is magical. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't know what to expect really when we first opened it up and tasted it. But the sweetness surprised me, and of course you've got the notes you expect, the vanilla and the caramels and things like that.
Right. It's extremely interesting. Again, it could be among one of the oldest 20 American light whiskeys out there. Certainly a category we really, as far as I know, we don't really see much unless it's a vintage bottle, and this is 25 years old. I love when you sent the press release, the announcement to the world out. You said, what were you doing in 1992? And this really helps us all take a pause and think about having a whiskey like this. What were we doing back then? It's a remarkable travel through time. It's a very interesting flavor. Well done with this, Dave. I think this is extremely interesting. And again, it's 100 seasons because, yeah, you're welcome. 100 seasons because it was in that barrel for 100 seasons.
That is correct. So, Tom, you didn't add what were you doing in '92?
What was I? I was a junior in high school, and so I was doing all those sorts of things. I don't know if there was whiskey in there. I don't know if we can talk about that, but there was definitely a lot of fun, a lot of greatness, and it was a good year of high school. And again, you were doing what were you doing?
What was I doing? I was living in an old mining shack in a Colorado ski town.
Wow.
I would like to go back.
Nice. Oh yeah. No, that would be. And what ski town was it?
Breckenridge.
Breckenridge, great place. So very cool. And eventually, the barrel found you. You found the barrel. It's a fun discovery. I mean, you have always been on a hunt for the best barrels, the best whiskey. I mean, tell us about that hunt. When it comes to whether it's this whiskey or another whiskey, what excites you when you find the right barrel?
Well, it's generally more than one right barrel, and sometimes it's
Maybe more than one, right?
yeah. Sometimes the way things work is you need to procure a lot of barrels,
You need a few. I get it.
and some are for blending, and some are for bottling on their own. Some are for both, which is a lot of fun with the 100 Seasons. And I'll get you a sample of Vertigo
Thank
as
you.
soon as I can. That was actually the most fun project I've done. But we'll get to that one for the next show.
Thank you. No, I would love that. And again, this is not just, obviously you've had a few new releases. We talked to you about a few releases you had earlier in the year. Every time there is, and we'll say this, we're all part of the this, you may have heard this line before. We're all part of the cocktail party when it comes to drink in the spirits industry. So we welcome and embrace all backgrounds, because we all need a drink when it comes to election time. But every time there is another election, you do this great thing with the presidential series. You call it the Presidential Dram. So you did this. When did you start this? 2 elections ago, or how many? I'm trying to remember how many elections ago you started.
This is the second time we've done it.
Right.
The first one was in 2016.
Right.
And the background on it was I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of great small, medium-sized distributors around the country, and become friends with them. And Mike Cherner, who runs Prestige LeDroit out of Washington, D.C., Delaware, Maryland. He grew up in that area, and the inauguration, no matter which candidate won, which party won, it was always just a great, fantastic party. And the one thing about DC that you can say, it's one of the best hospitality places in the world. And again, it's the same idea, is that while the people who work there, the bartenders and the wait staff and everyone else, they might have their political leanings, but they're all about hospitality when you walk in their door. They're not concerned with what bill you just voted on or who you're lobbying, as long as the lobbyist is picking up the check, I guess. But Mike came to me. Mike came to me and he said, it'd be really cool if we can do a 4-year-old whiskey and call it 1 term, and an 8-year-old whiskey and call it 2 terms.
Right.
So that was kind of a challenge, and it was early on, or maybe even before we started Proof and Wood. I didn't have a lot of barrels, so I had to go and hunt down some 8-year-old bourbon and 4-year-old rye at the time. And we basically did that with the first one as a DC only event. And we really weren't thinking how controversial or polarized that the 2016 election was going to be.
Right.
So it was like there wasn't a political meaning to it. And if you see the bottles in the series with the red wax has a blue label, white background.
Right.
And if you've got a blue label, you're going to get a blue wax, you're going to get a red label.
I love it. It's a little bit of all the colors that make it American.
They're all about red, white, and blue. It's celebrating kind of our tradition of the peaceful transition of power. And that's what it was meant to do. So there's some people who might gravitate towards one because they want a 1-term president or 2-term president. That's up to them. We're all about good whiskey in a bottle.
That's right.
So it was real successful the first time around. The double-edged sword of success is seeing some of the bottles trade on the secondary market. So you know people were enjoying it, and the whiskey was great. The bourbon was some of the best bourbon we bottled, and that gave kind of birth to what we now call the DC series. So you've got the Ambassador and the Justice, which are very limited 12-year-old bourbon, 14 and 16-year-old bourbons. We've got kind of the regular players, the Senator, a 6-year-old rye, all barrel proof, and the Representative, which is kind of hitting the market now, which is 4 years old, more sweeter bourbon mash bill.
So again, it's the Presidential Dram. There's a Senator and there's a Representative as well.
Yep.
So it's all of those. That's incredible. And again, Presidential comes out when there's a big presidential race. Same story with the Senator, Representative. They come out on the other years, the other 2 years.
The Senator Representatives, like their namesakes, are always available for sale.
Always available, but these are only during the presidential.
Every 4 years is the plan.
Excellent. Well, these which one of these do we want to try first? The rye or the bourbon?
The bourbon. It's a 4-year-old bourbon.
All right, let's try the bourbon first. And I tried a little of the rye earlier. I'm going to crack the blue label. I love the labels. I mean, again, this is something that's it looks very, very patriotic. To be a really historic whiskey. And then you see these. How do you? Again, I guess it's a rare release, and you have to search it out across the country.
Well, the bourbon, we did about 20 barrels. It's all single barrel proof.
Yes.
Those will be, fairly available if you're looking for them. And again, same deal. If you have trouble finding them, shoot us an email. The rye for the moment is incredibly limited. I think we did a total of 4 barrels, and they're 8-year-olds. So there's not a lot in them. There's maybe 120 cases around the country.
Wow. So the rye you can find the bourbon, the rye's
little tough out there. And we're planning on bottling 8 more barrels in the beginning of 2021 for the inauguration.
Incredible. So you'll during the inauguration, you will see more of the Presidential Dram out there. Certainly, no matter how you feel about the inauguration, everybody likes to drink, so they'll have a drink.
So the Presidential Dram bourbon, it's at least 4 years old.
Very nice.
Some of the barrels are 4 to 6. The mash bill is 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% barley. And the proof points are anywhere from 108 to 118.
Excellent. Man, that is delicious. That is mine is 116.9. Very, it's obviously high proof, but this drinks so much lower. The sugars, the caramel, the barrel, the finesse of this, it comes across to me much lower. This is an incredible selection.
Yeah, it's just a great, solid, classic bourbon, and it carries a lot of weight, but it's very, very approachable for something like that. And obviously, if you want it a little bit more approachable, a little water is not going to hurt you.
Right. That is really an incredible dram, and just beautiful packaging there. At least 4 years old, high proof bourbon. What do these sell for a bottle?
The 4-year will be around 55 to 60.
Okay, excellent. Wow, very nice. And I think I maybe failed to ask you the 25-year-old. That's going for what? What is that? I think someone may have asked that question.
That one is $350.
$350. Okay, so very, very limited, very rare. Something that if you're a bourbon whiskey aficionado, real collector, or you just really want to try something new, this is something that, and it's out on the market right now. It's already out there.
Yes, I saw that a retailer in Rochester has it on the shelves today, and I know we've shipped a few. It's been another challenge of 2020 is our bottler, like many others, started doing hand sanitizer for a while, right. And so all of our production schedules kind of got pushed back, and we just released it, middle of November, beginning of December, which is logistically a nightmare. But fortunately, I've got some great partners making it happen.
That's good. I mean, it's so important, and we've loved following so many new releases that have happened this year. I think that it's hats off to yourself, Dave, and all the other great people in the spirits industry who've continued to push products out there despite all the challenges to get out there, because people are always thirsty, even more so. And again, we continue to feature those products and just great people like Dave on BourbonBlog.com live. Make sure you subscribe and bookmark that, because we'll continue to have more and more great new whiskeys all the way through the end of the year and into the next, featured here on BourbonBlog.com live. As we look at Dave, as we look at the ability and just how many, we used to see 15, 20-year-old bourbons easier out there, 10, 15 years ago. What's that been like? I mean, obviously not only for you to put on the market, but also for the consumer to get.
You're breaking up there. If you can repeat that, that'd be great.
Oh, sorry about that. So it used to be, when I started, Bourbon Blog about 15 years ago, finding a 15-year-old bourbon, 20-year-old bourbon. I mean, they were still a little rare, but now it seems, whether it's a bourbon, American whiskey, it's tougher to get our hands on. From your perspective, putting that whiskey out there, what's that like? I mean, what have you noticed the last, obviously people want that older bourbon, but what's it been like for you?
Well, it's been interesting, I guess is a word we maybe overuse, but it's partially your fault. I mean, you and everyone who's been enthusiastic about teaching about whiskey and getting more and more people excited about whiskey. And, again, all of this is, I used the term before, a double-edged sword. Right. That it's great that we've got so many more people involved and some very hyper involved. And you have to love the enthusiasm. And so you've got more people chasing, not just chasing a limited supply, is, that's the thing about whiskey. 10, 15 years ago, yeah, all this stuff was readily available, but it wasn't selling very quickly.
Right.
And so people weren't planning on having 10, 15-year-old whiskey. Right. And some people with a little bit more knowledge than me might be able to tell you too that some of these expressions that were old were never intended to be put on the shelf when they were distilled, but they didn't get sold as younger whiskey at that point too. Going back to the time period where bourbon started, losing market share to lighter spirits. So both, the growth of all those products that you fondly remember being so easy to get probably was a result of not, projections not working out. And on the flip side, we have more people demanding it and the producers not projecting it out. And the other issue, being a producer, that you want to have older whiskey, but, you got bills to pay today. So it's really challenging, when somebody wants your 6-year-old whiskey and you think, well, if I wait another 6 years, I'll have 12-year-old whiskey.
Right.
It's much more in demand and much more valuable, but I got bills to pay today. And that's some of the reality of it. And again, a lot of it is people didn't realize what that demand is like. So when and again, literally year to year, I see the demand grow. When we first launched the Ambassador, which is a 12-year-old bourbon, there were people who were interested in it, and then people who nodded their head and then came back 6 months later, and they were excited about it, but we had none left. And currently it's all sold out.
Incredible. I mean, it's amazing to me as well, and so well said, Dave, that it used to be we would say, oh, we can go find a bottle of 12-year-old bourbon pretty easily, and it would be, the price point would be much, much lower. It's almost as if, I mean, and I think it is, that what do we define as old whiskey? I mean, what I may define as old whiskey and considered old bourbon, 10, 14, even 8, 9 years old, it seems to carry a different definition, and the year that marker changes, it seems like every year. I mean, is that kind of what you get to when you're finding your barrels? Do you feel like it's sort of held in a different place, that 8 or 9, whereas used to not be that old?
Again, in the grand scheme of things, I haven't been doing this that long, only about 10, 12 years, right? It feels like a century.
You put out a good amount, yeah.
But even in that time, there were points where 5, 6 year old whiskey was much easier to obtain than it is today.
Right.
But never were really old barrels. They were, they weren't as expensive.
Sure.
But they weren't. No one was giving them away when I was involved. A few years previous, my understanding is, that there was a lot of old whiskey that had gotten so old that the producers who made it felt, A, it didn't fit their profile, and B, the yield in the barrel was so low, they would sell it for not a lot of money.
Right.
That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, right. And again, I think those in the spirits community understand this, but the reason why the prices have gone up is not only is it costing us more money, but it also costs more money for the barrels, and just the demand is there. So it's we're very lucky that there still are wonderful bourbons and ryes like yours that are that are at I think a very appropriate price point, and that are very delicious.
Thank you. And I think that the cool thing is there's a lot of great whiskey from some newer distillers who now have been around for 7, 8 years, and there's other folks who do what I do in source whiskey who are doing a great job. And so, as much as things are hard to find, there's so much more stuff to play around with and enjoy.
It continues to be out there. This is really nice. So this is a very nice bourbon. Again, it is the Presidential Dram, barrel proof at 4 years old. It's a way you can you can feel patriotic. You can raise a toast to whichever president you would like to in history or current that you would like to raise a toast to. This is a very nice bourbon, and I just love the fact that it's 116.9, but yet to me drinks so much lower. It's elegant. It has just beautiful complexity about it. Again, we're talking about some rare products, but you have some other bourbons that are out there. That what your standard core line. You want to mention a couple of those?
Sure. The Deadwood Bourbon is actually the same whiskey as in the Presidential Dram.
Okay.
It's just about 3 years old right now and bottled at 81 proof.
The Deadwood, right.
So that you can get for $20, $25 a bottle. Drink it all day, every day.
Cool. The Deadwood. Look for the Deadwood series, and I also really like the Tumblin dice that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the nice single barrels. So many good bourbons. Also, you dabble in rum. You do so many great things there at Proof and Wood. The rums that you're known for. Mention those, because I love tasting those with you a few months back.
So right now there's 2 of them. One is the Funk.
Love that.
100 proof heavy pot still Jamaican rum that we bottle down in Kentucky. Really nice about that is it just gives you kind of an introduction to the style of Jamaican pot still rum. All that funkiness, all of those great tropical flavors, ripe vegetables, ripe fruit. But this one's approachable. And it's got bold flavors. It originally intended mainly for blending. And the other rum that we have is in fact a blended rum. It's all Jamaican distillate, about 70% column distilled rum, and the rest is pot distilled rum that was aged in Jamaica and then finished in Kentucky for 2 years. The column still rum distilled in Jamaica was actually aged in Canada. I don't know why, for 3 years, and then aged in Kentucky for 2. And that's blended at 84 proof. And again, it's also trying to put a Kentucky spin on a good blended rum with a lot of Jamaican notes.
They're both excellent. All these, the funk is so interesting. I mean, what these do for cocktails and just by themselves, and all of Proof and Wood products. You can go to proofandwood.com to learn more about those. Definitely follow them on social. Really learn what they're doing. All right, let's try this. We'll think of another president. Think of another president you really enjoy, and think about maybe the spicy character of that president, or even vice president. And this is the straight rye whiskey at 8 years old. A really beautiful 8-year-old whiskey. The one I'm holding, Dave, is 123.6 proof. This is some serious stuff. 61.8. What does this usually range between the bottlings on this?
The proof point?
Yeah.
This one, there were only 4 barrels. The lowest I think was 120. Mine, one that I had was 123.9.
Cool. So right around the same proof point. Really, just I tried this one a little earlier. Just incredible nose. I mean, and finding those. I mean, we see some of them, but finding those ryes at 8 years old. I mean, this is something that we don't see as much, especially barreled at a proof like this. Talk about what you like about bringing a higher proof rye to the market.
Well, I mean, this is like a lot of what I work with, the 95% Indiana rye.
Yeah,
and I think it really shines between 6 and 10 years old.
Yes,
it really develops character. The spiciness comes out a little bit more than when it's younger. And some of the properties of it when it's younger is a little bit more botanical and a little bit more delicate. I think the age really changes it and brings it into that, kind of powerful traditional rye, and that's what you're getting in here, with a lot of different flavor notes.
Some really there's some great grain and some spice off the nose, even maybe a little bit of floral nose I'm getting. Just really beautiful.
Yeah, the floralness is usually more pronounced when it's younger, but you'll still get
some of them.
Get hints of that.
It's that deeper kind of floral against barrel. It's it's getting older and older, and in that palate, that is some deep rye, man. That is really good. This is very nice.
The great thing about it is, it's well distilled. It picks up a ton of flavor, and you're at a point where you're getting that balance. You referenced cognac, old cognac before. One of the when you get older spirits, you often get these elegant wood flavors, and they're delicious. But sometimes those overpower the spirit. At this age point, you're still getting that balance between the spirit and the wood.
Yes. And it's right in between those markers of having too much wood, or not too much, but a very large concentration of that, or not enough of the age.
Yeah, I mean, you can still get an elegant spirit, but you lose the base spirit sometimes. And again, at 123 proof, you shouldn't really be able to drink it as easily as you can.
Right. This is a slow sipper. Certainly something just to sip on, to enjoy, maybe to have with very fine, maybe a very fine cigar. I can imagine this just would pair amazing with a really amazing cigar. This is lovely. So good.
That is always a good idea.
I like it. I think it's might just happen tonight. The weather's gotten better here on the border of Indiana and Kentucky today. It's been more like spring. I think it's one of our last glimpses we'll see. This again is out. These are both out right now.
Yeah, the bourbon is pretty widely available. The rye is going to be a little trickier to find. Again, if it's something that's of interest, you email us, and we'll try and hook you up with the right retailer.
Put that email up there once again, and it's the Presidential Drams, both out right now. And email Dave if you can't find those. And the Proof and Wood, 25-year-old American light whiskey, something so interesting and different that I've never. I've tasted old bourbons and ryes, but as far as that category goes, I think it's one of the first times I've had something that old for that category. Certainly gives us a glimpse of the past, but also something that just shows us what a nice 25-year-old whiskey can taste like, with that elegance, complexity, but also that just very approachable flavor. So many whiskeys as you've done this year. Anything that's obviously you've done a lot this year, my friend. You've got a lot out there during the pandemic. Anything you're looking forward to for 2021 on the realm of whiskeys, rums, anything?
So on the spirit side of things, a lot of continuing what we're doing. There's a couple of things that might see the light of day next year. I'm not sure. What my bigger hope is that we'll all be able to share some of this whiskey in our favorite bars and restaurants and support those folks.
Absolutely. It's so important that we continue to support establishments, bars, restaurants, however we can, getting whether it's going when you're able, getting cocktails to go, just helping out bartenders, servers, whatever it might be. It's so important. I completely agree, and we got to keep on helping them out. Hopefully, once we get together again, as a whiskey community, we're going to catch up on so many great whiskeys that we've all been trying during this era, and we'll have some great stuff. We'll definitely have some of these that we'll look forward to when I see you again, Dave.
Cool. As I like to say, with 100 seasons, drink the past, toast the future.
I like it, my friend.
Cheers.
Drink the past and toast to the future. Cheers, Dave. It's Dave Schmier, Proof and Wood. If you did join this broadcast midway through, it will be up permanently wherever you're watching it from. So make sure you watch it. Also, you can listen to it. We'll upload it later on our podcast channel, which is on all the podcasts. TuneIn, Spotify, Google, iTunes, or subscribe right there. Dave, great to see you. Thanks for the chance to chat with you and try these. And happy holidays, my friend.
Right back at you. Thanks for the opportunity, and look out for the vertigo.
Sounds good, buddy. Thank you.
Take care.
Cheers.